Guys, today Wayne Dyer shares one of my favorite quotes from him or thoughts from him, and that is change the way you look at things. And he goes on to give us an example of the science behind this. He talks about Albert Einstein, who once basically asked a question, and it's the most fundamental question that we should ask ourselves. Is the universe a friendly place or is it a hostile place? Two very clear questions, and the way we answer that question is going to determine the course of our life, how we view things. So the way you look at something will change that very thing. And it's so true. If we look at our lives, if we look at our lives as being meaningful, purposeful, positive, and impactful, well, that's what's going to happen with all the events around us. So it's up to us. How do you look at your life? Think about it. Have a good morning, everyone.
This is another part of the rebuilding process of somebody that wants to completely transform who they are. You have to change your identity. So who am I? I'm the smart guy, and that's how I thought of myself. Like I thought of myself as being smart, and then the life slapped me around, and I realized, oh wow, I'm really actually not that smart. I just grew up in a small town, and so in my small town, I was smart enough. I was still never the smartest, but then I moved to LA, and all of a sudden, people smarter than me were just like growing on trees. So I was like, wow, I really don't feel smart anymore. So that was like a hard adjustment, and so then putting myself into these smaller and smaller rooms was the solution, but I realized that I had been sort of taken as a default value intelligence. Maybe it was the family I grew up in or the movies I watched, I don't know. But I just had this default that being smart was the thing everyone should chase. And then I realized, oh, I can actually change that. Not everybody values themselves for that. And so I could swap that out with something else. And I want people to understand that those things that are just deeply within you that seem as if they are innate human qualities, challenge them all. Some things you won't be able to change, but some things are far more malleable than you thought. And a lot of what you value comes down to what you repeat. And so just repeating myself, I'm the learner, I'm the learner, I'm the learner. It began to be my identity, and then rewarding myself emotionally when I did that, repeating it, rewarding, repeating, rewarding. Then it's like through that repetition cycle, it actually starts to be meaningful that you're the learner. And by the way, I was telling everybody, I'm the learner. I see myself as the learner. I'm the learner. I'm the learner. And because I was telling people, then I really felt the sense of congruence with wanting to act like the learner. And so when you say you're going to do something and you do it, you earn self-credibility. So now I've got this loop going. I said I was the learner. Here I am reading this book. Here I am being willing to admit when I'm wrong, seeking out knowledge, looking for disconfirming evidence. Like I get to feel good about myself for that.
Figuring out your core values, I think, is one of the most important exercises that you can do as a human being. Like, how do you know how to live your life? How do you wake up every day and do what you want to do? How do you have any clarity on what to do next when you don't know what you stand for? When you don't know your most important core value? It's the reason why I wrote Your One Word, I don't know how many years ago. The concept is you have one most important core value. What is it? Figure it out. When you understand what it is, it'll shine a giant spotlight on your life to realize, oh, this is why I'm not happy. Like if you are ever not happy, frustrated, stressed out, it's because there's too many things that are going on in your life that are out of congruence with your single most important core value. So if you look at mine, it's belief, right? Believe is my single most important core value. Okay, cool. So I'm happy when I'm doing things that make me feel believe, and it's something you have for yourself, but it's also something that then you give to other people. So you're on a mission. The idea becomes, I want to spread belief for myself, and I also want to help other people believe in themselves more. Whatever you come up with as a core value is for you, is what you still need the most right now. I still need belief right now, but it's also something that we want to give to other people. Whether it's the world, if you're watching this video, it's probably world, big mission, but it could just be the closest people to you. You know, if your single most important core value is family, then you want to bring more family to your family. If your single most important core value is belonging, then you want to give belonging to everybody, to yourself. You still need to feel more belonging yourself, and you want to give that to the world or your closest friends and family. But that's the game. You have to figure out your single most important core value. If you feel like you're being pulled in 1,000 directions, that's why. You don't know what you stand for. If you feel uneasy about something or unsure about a decision, that's also why. You don't know what you stand for. And when you figure that out, it gives you the courage to take the action required. When you understand what your single most important core value is, it allows you to step into your courageous self, to step into your bold self. It gives you the permission to move forward where old you wouldn't have done it. You know, have you had those moments where you really want to do something? You're inspired, you got a great idea, it's like you want to serve, you want to help, you think this could be amazing, and then you stop yourself, you know? You stop yourself, who am I can't do that, I'm not well known enough, I don't have the money, I didn't go to school for this, I don't have the connections with the parents, right? We stop ourselves. We're planning to plan and getting ready to get ready, but we never actually do the thing. Well, figuring out your core value allows you to have the courage and strength to step into who you want to be. How can my one word be believe if I'm not willing to do the things to believe in myself? Even something like this, filming on the street, this used to terrify me. I remember the first video that I made when I was walking down the street. It's probably about a decade ago. My agent challenged me to do it, and I was terrified. I was terrified that people might judge me. I was terrified that just looking foolish and looking bad. I don't know. I was just terrified, filming in public. And I remember I was filming, and I made sure that I walked down just this really quiet street where nobody would see me, and made sure I looked around and nobody was there. And I started filming, and then there was a mail woman who came by. She was delivering the mail. I didn't see her before I started filming. And so as she walked by, I was like this. Do-do-do. Put the camera down, you know? It's like, I'm not doing anything. Nope. Do-do-do-do-do. And then when she left, you're like, okay, back to filming. And, you know, now, I mean, how many thousands of videos later, I'm much more able to get out in front of a camera and create. But what's the thing that helps me push? What's the thing that gives me the confidence or courage to do that thing that was incredibly scary at the time? Well, believe. Hey, my one word is believe. My most important core value is believe. So I need to step into it. It's a constant reminder. It always forces you to be not the version that somebody else wants for you, but the version that you want for you. Believe is inside me. It's not that it was just given to me by somebody. You don't have to have believe as your core value either. You can figure out what yours is. But if ever you're stuck with a big decision and you're not sure what to do, and you actually know what your most important core value is, then guess what happens? It forces you to go and take some action. Because otherwise you're operating against yourself, and you don't need somebody yelling at you or telling you what you should do. You know what you should do because you have the awareness around your core value. When I wrote your one word, it was designed for entrepreneurs because it's about how to find your core value, but then how to build into a business. And I was surprised that a lot of the people who liked the book were not just the entrepreneurs, but the spouses and the family members of the entrepreneurs who read the book. To say, okay, they don't want to start a business, but they need this first part. Kids in school are reading the book and send me pictures and tweets as they go through the curriculum to figure out what their most important core value is. Like, can you imagine being in grade 6, 7, 8, 10 and knowing what your most important core value is and using that as the lens through which you can make decisions for the rest of your life? Man, how beautiful is that? I wish I had that. I mean, that's why we do what we do, right? That's why authors write books. That's why entrepreneurs start businesses. We want to solve the problems that we had for ourselves, and we want to make the path a little bit easier for other people, right? That's why we do what we do. So how do you find your core value? Well, you can pick up your one word. You can pick up Built to Serve, but as a starting point, think about who your favorite teacher was growing up and why. Think about your favorite teacher of all time. Mine was Madame Farr, who was my teacher mentor in my last year of high school. But who was yours? Who was your favorite teacher growing up, and why? And specifically on the why, it wasn't because they taught you a certain subject. I didn't like Madame Farr because she taught me French. Right? I don't use French day to day at all. Even living in Canada, we don't use French. But she taught me to believe in myself. So there's one. What's your favorite movie of all time and why? Mine is Seabiscuit. I love Seabiscuit. It's about this horse that's way too small to win, not supposed to win, a jockey that's way too big to win and not supposed to win, an owner that has no money and is not supposed to win. It's like all this stuff that's not supposed to happen, and yet they all find each other, and somehow, miracle miracle of miracles, they figure it out and they win a whole bunch of races. It's based off a true story. It's a belief story. At least for me, when I think about that movie, why do I love it? Well, it's about belief. Think about your parents. You know, maybe you loved your parents, maybe you hate your parents. What was the biggest lesson that you learned from them? Like, what did you love the most? Even if you didn't like your parents or didn't think they were there for you, or, you know, whatever. What did you love about them? Or if there's nothing redeemable that you can find, then what did you wish that they gave you? What do you want to give to your kids, right? Current kids or future kids. If you had to give them one lesson, what would that be? Again, mine is belief. My parents always taught me, hey, you're Evan Castrelli Carmichael, you can do anything you believe that you can. So believe is a common thread through all these things. If you think about this, why does this matter? If you think about all the things that made you come alive, all the best moments in your life, all the positivity, all the happiness, all the best moments in your life, there's a common thread between them. You know, so for me it's believe. Madame Farr, Seabiscuit, my parents, the common thread is believe. When you figure what that thread is for you, what it allows you to do is now design a life going forward with more intention. So now, instead of it happening by accident, you know, I just happened to find Madame Farr. I just happened to find Seabiscuit. It wasn't intentional. Most of us are not doing that with any level of intentionality. It's just that random things happen, and every now and then one of those random things are good, right? But now it allows you to design a life with more intentionality, to say, this is what I stand for. This is who I am at the core. These are the things that make me happy. I want to chase down the feeling of X, believe for me, right? I want to chase down that feeling of believe more. I want to be around the people who help make me believe. I want to create content and a business that inspires people to believe. I want to hire teammates, people in my business. We got 40 people now. I want to bring on people who believe in the mission, believe in spreading believe in each other, right? It's like it just gives so much more clarity and intentionality for the rest of your life. And so I think it's one of the most important exercises that you can ever do, just as a human. I don't know why we don't teach this stuff in school. You should. Because how do you operate your life without knowing what you stand for? How do you operate without knowing who you are? It seems crazy. And it's not that difficult. And you don't have to go meditate on a mountain for 5 years to figure it out. You don't have to hire a $10,000 coach to figure it out. Just ask yourself those questions. Who was your favorite teacher growing up and why? What's your favorite movie of all time and why? What did you love about your parents? Or what's the gift that you want to give your kids? The most important core value coming through those things. That'll give you a much better path and direction and clarity and strength and courage for the rest of your life.
Also, to make sure you're actually taking action after watching this video, I've designed a special free worksheet just for the video. The worksheet will highlight all of the lessons learned in this video, as well as pull out our 3 favorite learnings and quotes that will inspire you to actually do something. The worksheet will also give you space to write down what your key takeaways are and your specific plan of action to make sure you're getting results. If you want the worksheet designed specifically for this video, absolutely for free, there's a link in the description below. Go click on it and start building the momentum in your life and your business. I'll see you there.
As Elon Musk said, good afternoon, guys. One of the things we have to understand about ourselves, because it affects everything, is what's at our center. What are we centered on in life? And what I have found, and what I have read about, and what I have thought about and seen over and over again, is that the happiest people, or the most successful people, are centered on correct principles. And that's what we have to center our life on. We cannot center our life on anything outside of us, not even people. And I know it might seem selfish. It might sound like, how can that be? Especially when we're involved in intimate relationships or just close relationships with our family members. but we have to center on correct principles because those are the things that are within all of us anyhow. And so if we do that, we become the best we can be for them as for ourselves as well. Hope this helps everyone. Have a great afternoon.
The idea that the market is always rational and that people always make these rational decisions is utter nonsense. You want to live your dream, and the beauty of doing that as quickly as possible is that as soon as you start living it, the dream will change. Your dreams grow. Be patient, have a few companies that you really do understand, and buy them when the market fluctuates, which it inevitably will. And that's it. There's no one size fits all, man.
Hey, Believe Nation. In today's interview, I sit down with a very well-known and successful investor who I've looked up to for a long time, named Phil Town. He's very well known for writing amazing books like Invested, Rule 1, and Payback Time, which I would all recommend you checking out if you're interested in investing. And he also runs an education company called Rule 1, where he's helping inspire millions of people to learn investing on their own so they can take control of their lives. In today's interview, we discuss everything from building wealth to success to really happiness and really mastering your life. So if that seems interesting to you, I know you'll love this interview. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. With this series I'm doing, and for the viewers who haven't seen the other episodes I've created, I'll put a link in the description for that. My goal, and for people to tune in and almost see me kind of go through the trials and errors of learning to be a great investor, since that is my all-time goal. Even though I run a business right now, eventually I'd like to shift to being a great investor. So one of connecting with Guy Spear, Manesh, and then finally Phil Town, who is actually the person who introduced me to those individuals without even knowing it. So when I was 19, I went to college and I found it a waste of time. And I saw a YouTube video from you on how to invest your first $1,000. And that video, you laid out a specific set of books. And those books you laid out, Guy, Manesh, your book, were the first 5 books I ever read that were nonfiction. And without that path laid out for me, I don't know where I'd be. So I just want to acknowledge and say thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Those are good books.
Yes. Really and anyone who's interested, I would highly recommend reading Rule 1 by Phil Town. Great book.
I asked my daughter, what's her favorite book, right? Danielle, right? And she said, well, my favorite book is Guy Spear's book. I'm like, come on. Dad, you could just at least be a homer, and but Guy's book is phenomenal. Monesh's book is phenomenal. Yeah, that's a great start you had there. Those, one of the friends of mine is the guy Jay McInerney. I don't know if you know who he is, but he started Square, and he talks about in his book called The Innovation Stack, which is probably the most honest and maybe the best book ever written about entrepreneurial enterprises, starting something that's going to be something, you're not starting a Me Too kind of a business to just, make a living and not have a boss. You're starting something to change the world. He wrote this book, Innovation Stack, a couple of years ago. And by the way, since he did Square, he's gone on to become a member of the Federal Reserve Board in St. Louis. And he's really moved up into the elite circles of finance, and Jeremy basically said that the people that mentored him were books, effectively books. I mean, here's this guy who changed the world really by creating, a credit system for the little guy. And all of his mentors were either dead people or, and I think that's a wonderful way to think about books. And I'm really glad you started off that way. It's a good way to go.
Yeah. I cannot express, even just being set on the right path of what types of books was crazy. Cause I don't know how you feel about the education system right now, but unless you're going into STEM, I don't know. I don't understand what's the point on it when you can pick up a $20, $30 book from some of the world's brightest minds? It's yeah.
You're familiar with Lee Lu, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Lee Lu made a comment to the Columbia Business School students when he was giving a lecture there a few years ago. After being frustrated with how little they really knew about our style of investing, value investing, he was stunned. These are 2-year MBA students on their way to Wall Street, and they didn't know anything. They didn't know the basics. And so he said, look, this is why I don't hire you. I wouldn't hire anyone in this room. I mean, he said, no one who works for me has a master's degree or really any experience with, large corporations that are involved in finance. He says, because they're not trainable. They don't understand. They've already been warped, essentially, is what he said. So I think the education system right now goes a long way to warping people, because I don't know if this is fair exactly, maybe it's not, but it feels like the academics have become arrogant to a point where they no longer are looking at what really works in the world. They're just looking internally at what they think works in the world and creating a world based on that. And as a result, you have, well, in our world, you have, 50 years of modern portfolio theory, efficient market hypothesis, which is utter. 3 Nobel Prizes have been awarded in the last 20 years to people who said it. So you just don't have to listen to me. I mean, great economic superstars like Robert Shiller at Yale, have really proven that the idea that the market is always rational and that people always make these rational decisions is utter nonsense. What I haven't seen a lot of in academia, or even in anybody really, even with Warren or Charlie or Manesh, is the recognition for why the market can be irrational, why really smart people who did all the academic stuff that you didn't do, and mostly that I didn't do, are able to make that mistake and become irrational. And you see comments from all the way back to Ben Graham about how the market gets irrational. But the why part of it, actually, I think Danielle, my daughter, put her finger on, which was that the people who have about 85% of the money in the market have a very major economic and career incentive to deal in short-term thinking. They don't get a benefit from being right if they're not right until 3 years from now. In fact, they get fired. Keith McCullough is a really good guy. He was working as a hedge fund manager on a sub fund, and he made the right call on the real estate meltdown in 2008. He was buying insurance policies against those bonds for about a year, and his boss got more and more agitated that Keith was putting his fund money into these insurance premiums that would ultimately ended up having made a fortune. The same ones that Michael Burry made a fortune on. And Keith, in November of 2007, he got fired for refusing to back off of what he knew was the right thing. His boss fired him, and of course, it was only a couple months later that the whole thing cratered. And so you pay a very high price on Wall Street for not being part of the consensus. And the high price that you pay isn't a high price that you want to be part of the consensus in Wall Street because you stay hired. Because a huge amount of the money, Jeremy, is invested through banking funds and pension funds, more and more exchange traded funds that are just passive investors. And those, well, not so much the exchange traded funds that are passive, but the ones that are more active are the fund of fund managers. The pension fund managers is hiring people like Guy Spear or Monesh to manage the money for them. And they'll hire, I don't even know, it's like California Teachers Pension Fund has like $200 billion in the market. So they've hired a whole bunch of different fund managers. And that guy sees his job as managing those managers. And he's certainly not going to sit there waiting for some guy to be right for 3 years if the market's going up and this guy's portfolio isn't keeping up with it. He just isn't going to sit there. And the end result is that the cautionary tales, of people like Bruce Berkowitz, who was dead right in 2010 on Bank of America, AIG, and Citi, and later, made a bloody fortune by buying those companies at those prices in 2010, but fundamentally got fired by his own fund, by all of these pension funds pulling their money out. He had $11 billion come out of his fund in a matter of a year. And so everybody knows the lesson. It's a cautionary tale. Don't stick your head up. You don't want to run a fund such that you're trying to duplicate Warren Buffett. That's a huge mistake if you're on Wall Street, because Buffett has been in cash for long periods of time, has underperformed the market from time to time. And, he's not getting fired, but you are. And so that's a lesson that everybody learned. And as a result of that, the market becomes what we think of as irrational. It's completely rational from a fund manager's perspective who's on Wall Street. If Apple Computer is going down like a brick, you sell it. You don't sit there holding on to it while it goes down 50% so you can buy more. You get out of there so that you can stay with your peer group. And that's what creates these mispricings from time to time. And that once you get that, you start to realize, whoa, then just an ordinary person who isn't playing the game the way they do it on Wall Street absolutely can outperform fund managers. All you have to do is do what these great teachers say to do. Be patient, have a few companies that you really do understand, and buy them when the market fluctuates, which it inevitably will. And that's it. Then you're done.
So I have two questions on that, and that is, it is so fascinating talking about efficient market theory. People are still holding on to it today, even saying, well, now with the internet and all this feeds that pop up on your phone and laptop, like it's more efficient than ever before because you have all the data you could ever have. I don't know how you feel about this, where it seems that with all this news and media being bombarded at us, we're becoming more short-term focused than long-term. So it's almost, I'm curious to get your thoughts. Do you see that we're actually moving away from long-term with all this new technology and rapid gratification coming from these social media?
Absolutely. 100%, Jeremy. Look at the rise of Robinhood. I mean, this is a website that really was groundbreaking. They said, come on and you can come on and trade for free here. And it was effectively, I don't want to say preying on naive investors, but a little bit, right? Because nothing's for free. And so they were basically running a little game behind the scenes where, you weren't getting the best price when you bought, and you weren't getting the best price when you sold. They were taking a little piece in the middle there. That wouldn't have happened with other brokers where you charge the fee. And basically they gamified the idea of investing. So you got all this stuff going off that make it look really cool. And I think Charlie Munger is appalled by Robinhood because it invites people to come in and gamble. And that's effectively what they're doing. And the more people that come in and gamble in what I would consider the late stages of a really irrational bull market, driven by Federal Reserve policies and an enormous amount of money printing by both, fiscal and monetary policy in the United States, driving this market sky high makes a lot of people a winner who are gambling, right? You buy call options and you can become a big winner if everything goes up and brings your boat with it. So the thing that's happening in the market now is very similar to what happened with real estate from 2000 on, when interest rates went way down and people were encouraged to buy homes with no money down. You end up with, you end up with strippers owning 6 houses in Las Vegas. You end up with these major market top signals that are like, holy crap. And we're having major market top signals right now. I mean, not that the people on Reddit are strippers, but that they're betting, and it's just a big gamble and a big game. And that has created, I think, a kind of a mindset of very short-term thinking and the attempt to get rich quick, getting home runs. And the end result is that most people are going to experience a really negative result from that. You'll have a few people that get rich. very similar to what's going on with Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is driving a lot of the emotion around investing in other things because of people getting very, very rich on Bitcoin and Ether and so on, by just gambling and betting on it all. And so what happens is when you see enough people around you who are stupider than you are, and you know they're just dumber than you are, and you realize that fool just got rich on Bitcoin. I need to be doing something.
Or worse, Dogecoin.
Or Dogecoin. There's a guy who borrowed everything he could get his hands on and got $250,000 and put it all into Dogecoin after a tweet by Elon Musk. Okay. And he made $1 million in 2 months, this guy. And when they interviewed him about this article about people getting rich on crazy stuff, he said, yeah, no, I'm not selling anything. When this gets to 10 million, then I'll take out $1 million, but not till it gets to 10 million. So here's a guy who has no concept of price versus value. It's all just a magic set of numbers and a game that he's hoping to win with a bet and a lot of courage to stay with it, So I don't think it's gotten less volatile. I think it's gotten crazy more volatile. And adding to the volatility has to be the fact that we now have a huge portion of the market invested in passive strategy, which means that when things start going down from the active investors realizing things are overpriced and they're going to get out, they will force the passive investors to sell, which will accelerate the mood that there's a reason to be fearful. And we will see much quicker shifts in the market. I think we saw the first piece of that back in March 2020, where if you weren't already substantially in cash, things moved so quickly, you didn't have a chance to adjust your portfolio to get, the famous Warren Buffett bucket to come out there and catch that gold. And you just had to, there's nothing you could do. It just went down so damn fast that you really didn't have a chance to reset the portfolio. And I think that's the lesson for the future here, is that you have to get your wash tub out early, get your bucket out early, even if you're way early, and just be rational about the market. Don't try to, I wouldn't want to sell anything that I thought was still somewhat undervalued or something I want to buy more of. But I would liquidate things that are overpriced and they've ridden the market to sort of a crazy level. Why not get the cash out of there? It can't go on forever and ever and ever at this rate, right? So it won't. If it can't, it won't. And at some point it comes down. And that volatility, you will see, I think, will be extreme when it comes down. You got another factor, by the way, just to throw in one more brick on the camel's back, is that the baby boomers, my generation of investors, was the largest generation in American history. And now sort of our kids are creating another generation like that. And that generation is well into their retirement years, in the 60s, late 50s, all through the 60s and 70s. And they have to be concerned to get their capital out of the stock market, because if it crashes and is down for 10 years, a lot of people won't be able to recover, and they will have to take money out when it's really a bad time to do so. And they will end up not having enough money to retire fully. And so we end up with a lot more people going back to work at Walmart, who are 86 years old. And that's a sad scene. So that also is adding to the potential for volatility, as you have this huge group of retirees who may make a one-way trip out of the market. And then that'll be the end of that capital.
And I remember you also on a podcast you did with Danielle, because I've been following for these past 5 years since I was 19. I even remember you saying that, and I looked it up myself afterwards because I was very curious about it, where, people still say, well, no one has lost money for 5 to 10 years. When that's just not true. Like, there have been periods where 10 years plus and you just got your money back.
Right.
So
right.
Yeah, I don't think people realize that as well.
And in this particular case, the next time there's, let's say, a 5-year gap, let's just say everybody can agree there can be a 5-year gap. In that 5-year gap, at current sort of headline inflation of 7.5%, in that 5-year period, you you'll see a devaluation of your buying power of 50% or more. That's the headline rate. If we use a calculation of inflation that was used back in 1980 that they've stopped using because it would require more increases in cost of living on government programs. If we use the 1980 method, our inflation rate's running 15% right now, in which case in 5 years, what did I say? I meant your money would be cut by 1/4, the way they're looking at it, headline. It'll be cut in half if you look at it on the sort of old inflation rate calculator. And so if you're just getting your money back in 5 years, the money you got back isn't what you put in. It's only going to buy anywhere between 75% and 50% of what you could have bought 5 years ago. And that's a disaster. So the Federal Reserve is trying to get this under control, but they've got a huge problem. And that is the moment they start seriously increasing interest rates, then the calculation done on modern portfolio theory of the value of the market goes negative on them, and PE ratios start to come down, and you have this sudden beginning of a serious recession in the economy and a drop in the market that would go with that. So they would have lots of things that would go wrong. The real estate might flatten out or go down. Stock market starts to drop. We go into a recession. A lot of people unemployed. The mood of the country shaky. And the Federal Reserve's job is to kind of prevent all that kind of stuff, right? So if they raise interest rates to try to slow inflation down, they're going to run into real problems politically and economically. And if they don't raise them, then you're running this risk of having the currency devalue faster than your investments can keep up with it, particularly if the market goes down. So I think there's a lot of different kinds of risks here that, including volatility, including the government programs, including the baby boomers, that will make this a time to, I think, pay a great deal of attention to Ray Dalio right now is what I would be doing. I would read everything he's been writing. I think he's got his head screwed on straight in many, many ways. And his basic recommendation is get yourself into an all-weather program. Basically look at holding a lot of different kinds of things. You want a certain kind of diversification, and you want to get a diversification away from the US dollar if the US dollar is going to be in trouble. So investing in places or currencies like Switzerland, for example, or Norway, or Singapore, or China would provide some diversification against the dollar devaluation, because it's really hard to keep up with dollar devaluation if stocks aren't going anywhere and the US dollar is going down at 7.5% a year. That's going to be a real rough sledding. So yeah, I think we're in for a rough go here if you use normal thinking, normal academics thinking about what's happening. I think we're in for an extremely exciting time if you are a Monesh Pabrai or a Guy Spear or a Jeremy Stickney or I think we're in for a blast. I think it's going to be really exciting, and this is where I think many people who follow these kinds of investing strategies will create generational levels of wealth here. And that's going to be pretty exciting. I mean, would you be pretty excited if the market goes down, you're able to buy into it, and over the next, let's say 12 years, you compound your money at 36% a year, just leaving it alone, not doing anything brilliant. You just bought in a bunch of companies and they went back up with all these Fed policies. And the end result would be 6 doubles, right? So if you put in 100 grand, you got 200, 4, 8, 1.6, 3.2, 6.4 million. 100,000 becomes 6.4 million. You're well on your way to generational wealth. I think those numbers are going to be doable. I think you'll see some people 12 years from now have done that kind of rate of return.
And it's just a matter of understanding, trimming the portfolio of, if you made a gain, don't expect it to keep going up. It'd be okay to take some off the table, get educated about even not just like personal companies, but you're actually also saying paying attention to the macro side of things these days. Because I know a lot of investors within your space, they don't even think about the macro, but I think those times are a bit, I don't know if you can do that right now, or at least it doesn't feel like that.
It doesn't feel like that. And
Good evening, guys. I want to share with you a funny personal story. So you guys know that I'm trying to provide as much positive thought energy by spreading it, spreading my mission, my life mission, and I'm really excited about it. I really want to do the best I can with it, with what I have and what I know. But I make mistakes, and I have to laugh at this one. Last week, my friend Zach, YouTube friend Zach, reminded me that there are a lot of things that I'm perhaps not doing the right way or following the rules, so to speak. But I've been sending a message, and yeah, it's been a standard message that I'm trying to show my support for people that are spreading positive thought energy. But Zach was telling me that it's been identified as spam on YouTube, and I thought, this is hilarious. I said, again, this is an example. I don't know my how, but I know my why. My why is good. It's strong. It's pure. It's right. But I make mistakes, and we can laugh at it. Have a great evening, everyone.
Sleep is the fundamental layer of mental and physical health. If there's one thing that we should all be doing is working toward sleeping long enough and deeply enough 80% of the time.
Okay.
I think that 80% is a good goal.
Yeah.
Because things happen.
Yeah.
Right?
You're
Travel happens, kids happen, illnesses
the weekend,
happen.
you're going out or whatever, yeah.
Until you are sleeping long enough and deeply enough, 80% of the nights of your life, you are functioning suboptimally.
And what's the biggest risk then if we're not getting enough sleep?
Okay, so there are a number of risks to not getting enough sleep. Deficits in learning, deficits in the immune system, reduction in testosterone and estrogen in both men and women, so disruption of hormones, disruption of gut microbiome, increased cancer risk. There are a bunch of things. The severity of those things depends on a lot of other things too. Prior health, other health conditions, context, age, occupation. You know, if you're not getting enough sleep and you're a high-rise construction worker, it's different than if you're an office worker. Okay, so we need to sleep enough. Now, what's enough sleep? This is an interesting question. Enough sleep has been argued it's 6 hours. Other people it's 7 hours. Other people it's 8 hours. It's basically waking up without an alarm clock and feeling rested. Insomnia is actually a medical term nowadays, and insomnia is essentially diagnosed as falling asleep during the middle of the day due to lack of sleep at nighttime.
Okay,
but many people who are having trouble sleeping at night are not falling asleep during the middle of the day. They're dealing with grogginess or crankiness or other effects of having fragmented sleep.
What are the main causes of not being able to fall asleep? Is it rumination? Is it traumas that you're holding on to? Is it arguments? Is it self-doubt or insecurities? Is it you nap too much? Is it the foods you ate too late? Like, what would you say are the main causes of not being able to fall asleep?
All of the above. But the primary one is a failure to turn off your thoughts.
Okay.
And I think that might provide a good anchor point for us to talk about some protocols. Really, a excellent night's sleep begins in the morning. I talked about this on the previous episode, so I won't go into detail, but everyone should get as much bright light in their eyes, ideally from sunlight, first thing in the morning, 10 to 30 minutes outside, depending on how bright it is. Eyeglasses or contact lenses are fine. Don't wear sunglasses if you can do it safely. If you wake up before the sun rises, turn on bright lights, then go outside once the sun rises. If you have no access to sunlight, use a daytime simulator or similar, like a ring light, and get that light in your eyes.
Okay.
So that's all of that in a compact form. Caffeine. You can inhibit falling asleep with caffeine. You have to figure out when your threshold is. For me, I can drink caffeine up until about 3, even 4 o'clock in the afternoon and sleep like a baby.
And still sleep well.
Yes, and Matt Walker, our good friend
Yes.
Matt Walker, would say that my sleep isn't as good as it would be had I cut caffeine out earlier.
By like 11 or 12 a.m.
Right, and I want to acknowledge, Matt is the Michael Jordan of sleep science, and so I'm not going to...
You're the LeBron James. Yes.
No, and in fair... Thank you for the compliment, but no, I'm not. I know a lot of the science and the protocols, but that's Matt's wheelhouse, and so if he says something, it's true, and if I say something and our opinions conflict, it's likely to be something that the data are still emerging, or in that case, default to Matt being correct, because I just out of due respect for his expertise. So caffeine, for some people they can have a 2 o'clock espresso, 2 p.m. espresso. Some people it's 4 p.m. Some people can drink caffeine at 8 p.m. and fall asleep. But there I would say it's problematic because you're disrupting the architecture of sleep and the brain waves associated with sleep chemicals and so forth. So get that morning light, cut your caffeine off at the time that allows you to fall asleep. That morning light also sets a timer on your melatonin rhythm. So you have this gland in your brain called the pineal gland. That pineal is the source of melatonin. Melatonin makes you sleepy, but it does not keep you asleep.
Okay.
Melatonin starts to rise in the late evening and continues into the night and then eventually tapers off. This is naturally occurring melatonin release, not supplemented melatonin release. The fastest way to slam melatonin to the pavement and eliminate it in your system is to look at bright light for, I hate to tell you this, even a few seconds. So,
You mean at night?
at night is typically when melatonin rises.
Yes.
It's when it's released in the bloodstream and when it has this effect of making us sleepy. It does a number of other things too.
You want more melatonin at night, is that right?
You do. And
Yes.
if you wake up in the middle of the night or it's 8 o'clock and you decide you want to go to bed at 9 or it's 9 o'clock, you want to go to bed at 10, you go into the bathroom and you flip on the bright lights, your melatonin levels just got crushed down to
So
zero.
having lights on is the worst thing you can do.
Yes, and it doesn't matter if it's blue light, red light, purple light, green light, bright lights inhibit melatonin very acutely, and therefore you want to avoid exposure to bright lights at night if your goal is to be asleep. So the simple rule that governs all this stuff is when you want to be alert, get bright light in your eyes, ideally from sunlight. So that's true in the morning and throughout the day. And when you want to be sleepy or asleep, avoid bright light in your eyes. Now, many home environments don't allow you to have zero lights, and that's not actually necessary. You can just dim the lights in the evening. Ideally, you also avoid overhead lights because the neurons in the eye that trigger this melatonin suppression and so forth, they reside in an area of the eye that views upper visual space. So you could have desk lamps or and just dim those down. If you're going to work on a screen, dim it way down. Will blue blockers help? Yes, but if the light is bright enough, you're still going to inhibit melatonin.
Need motivation?
Watch a top 10 with Believe Nation.
Hey, it's Evan Carmichael, and I make these videos because you are probably the most ambitious person in your circle, but you know you're capable of more, and you get that push by surrounding yourself with the best. So today, let's learn from one of the best, Dr. Andrew Huberman, and my take on his top 10 rules of success. Enjoy. Rule number 2, optimize your environment.
Most people are primarily visual. There's an interesting study that was published recently, just came out, and that shows that actually memory and recall for material that's consumed on a phone is much lower than on the written page. And there's an interesting reason that they give for this. There could be a lot of reasons. I just want to point that out. They monitored breathing, and they monitored heart rate, and they monitored some other physiological signals while people were either reading on a smartphone or reading paper. And what they found was that breathing was essentially normal or equivalent in both conditions, meaning people breathed the same way, whether or not they were reading on their smartphone or reading from a written page. But there was a particular category of breath that was abolished by reading on the smartphone. And this is what is referred to as physiological sighs. I talk a lot about physiological sighs on the podcast, and my lab works on them. This is a spontaneous, innate pattern of breathing that's governed by a little subset of neurons in the brainstem. For those of you who want to know, this is a brainstem area called the parafacial nucleus, discovered by Jack Feldman at UCLA, who's the kind of world expert in the neural mechanisms of respiration. And this little collection of neurons, probably only 100 neurons or so, makes sure that every 3 to 5 minutes, you do what's called a physiological sigh, which is a very deep breath, sometimes followed by another short inhale. So, and then a long exhale. And the double deep breath, or the very deep breath, reinflates the little sacs in the lungs. Your lungs aren't just 2 big bags of air. They actually have hundreds of millions of little sacs that we call the alveoli of the lungs. And when you don't do these physiological sighs, so in the second or third minute after not having done a physiological sigh, these little sacs collapse. And they're kind of moist on the inside. So you can imagine trying to blow open a balloon that's moist on the inside. You need a little bit of added air pressure. And so those sighs reinflate those. And then on the exhale, allow you to offload carbon dioxide. Now, this happens even during sleep. every 3 to 5 minutes. And I've talked a lot about physiological size as what I think is really a terrific real-time tool for reducing anxiety and calming oneself down. Indeed, it works very well. We have a study that's out for review now. It's a collaborative work with David Spiegel in psychiatry, but it points out that these physiological sighs can be used double inhale through the nose, long exhale through the mouth to calm down. And it works very well because you offload carbon dioxide. Now, in this study about smartphone reading versus reading on paper, what they found is that people stop engaging in physiological sighs during anytime they're reading on the smartphone. Now, it wasn't a perfect study because they probably also should have had a tablet and a laptop condition. So it's not clear whether or not it's due only to the reduced aperture of the visual window that you're narrowing your attention. And there's this sort of almost like an apnea, a kind of starving of yourself for oxygen when you do this. But it's very clear, I mean, it's abundantly clear that two things. One is nasal breathing, and that the other is getting sufficient oxygen to the brain is important for comprehension. So the takeaway from this is, if ever possible, try and read from a written page, and if you, or from a book or a piece of paper. And if you can't do that, then try and access whatever you're learning from as large a screen as you can manage in that particular environment.
Right.
And I do realize when people are commuting, and sometimes I'm guilty of looking at my phone and trying to read papers and passages on my phone. But it's interesting because this study highlights the linkage between this visual attention, our respiration, and the fact that, our body and our brain have these innate mechanisms for making sure that we're getting sufficient oxygen, we're getting sufficient blood flow to the brain areas that are required for learning. And so again, I don't want to de-emphasize the fact that there is a lot of legitimate clinically diagnosed ADHD out there. But for a lot of people that are struggling with attention, or they feel like they just can't focus, I think we all owe it to ourselves to ask, well, what kind of environment am I creating for myself that is depriving me of this focus? And what simple things can I do to try and enhance my ability to focus? Because I'm personally of the belief that if possible, and wherever it's not hazardous, to start with behavioral tools, right? Before ever moving to supplementation or prescription drugs, unless there's a real dire need, I would think that behavioral tools should be the most valuable, for the simple reason that when you engage in a behavior over and over again, you get neuroplasticity, your brain circuits change and get better. Simply taking a drug or a supplement of any kind, although they can have their value, isn't going to rewire your brain in the ways that you want. You are essentially dependent on that chemistry in order to access the state that you want.
Right. Rule number 3, develop alertness.
The whole process of neuroplasticity and learning is really a two-stage process. First, there must be focus and alertness. That focus and alertness is associated with the release of neurochemicals, so-called neuromodulators, things like acetylcholine in particular, which sort of acts as a highlighter pen, if you will, for certain connections in the brain to later be reinforced. And the neurochemical adrenaline, which is also called epinephrine, also depending on if you're in the UK or elsewhere. A long, interesting story, not for this time, about why it has multiple names. Epinephrine, also called adrenaline, is associated with an increase in kind of agitation and alertness. Acetylcholine, think of it as kind of a spotlight or a highlighter pen for certain connections in the brain. So you need alertness and focus. And then the second stage is that it is only during of deep rest, in particular sleep, and something that I call non-sleep deep rest, which I've given an acronym because scientists like acronyms, NSDR, non-sleep deep rest. Things like yoga nidra, things like shallow naps, things like forms of meditation that don't involve a lot of focused concentration. You're far more the experienced meditator than I, so I'm outside my wheelhouse when talking about meditation. But it is only periods of intense focus and alertness followed by periods of deep rest that allow the nervous system to change. And there is an abundance of evidence for that. So that's the first thing to understand. The brain actually rewires during deep sleep and rest, because during deep sleep and rest, naps, yoga nidra, deep sleep, there's a replay of the very same cells in the brain that were active during learning, oftentimes in reverse for reasons that are still not understood, but at a much higher repetition rate. So you're actually getting repetitions while you sleep. This is why one will strain to learn a language or a motor skill or maths or something like that over and over and over. It doesn't happen. You take a couple of nights sleep, take a break from it, and all of a sudden it's there. It's because it happens in rest. Now, there's some other things that one can do to enhance this process further that are arrived to us from good data. First of all, there's a so-called ultradian rhythm, which is the 90-minute cycles during which we can focus pretty well for a duration of about 90 minutes. Of course, flickering in and out of focus. Nobody really focuses for 90 minutes straight unless they've built up that capacity, or they are very interested in what they're learning, right? They're just wrapped with attention. Usually people flicker in and out. And of course, nowadays there's a lot of literature and ideas about ways to maintain focus. Put the phone away, limit noise. Some people like background noise, some people like music, some don't. It's very contextual, highly individualized. But 90 minutes is sort of the batch of time that the brain can focus really hard on one thing before it needs a true rest of an hour or two before you can go back to learning or working very hard. The other thing is that there's some very interesting data showing that shallow naps, or NSDR, non-sleep deep rest, done within 4 hours of one of these 90-minute learning bouts can be very beneficial for accelerating learning. And then there are these incredible data on so-called gap effects. So there have been studies now of skills that are physical skills, mental skills, where people will, for instance, try to learn scales on the piano, or a math problem, or a spatial problem, or a physical skill. And then at random, every so often, a buzzer will go off and the person will just be told to do nothing. Sit there, eyes closed or eyes open, and do nothing. Just stop the learning process for about 10 seconds and then return to doing what they're doing. These are these little micro rests. It turns out that during those micro rests, the hippocampus, a brain area, as you know, that's associated with learning and memory, and the neocortex, also associated with learning and memory, undergoes replay of the thing that the individual is trying to learn at 20 times the speed, also in reverse, just as in sleep. And that can lead and has been shown to lead to accelerations in learning. So there are these ways. I wouldn't even think of them as hacks, because the word hack is a little tricky, because when I think of the word hack, it seems like doing something with an object or a tool that wasn't designed for that purpose, right? The nervous system already harbors these mechanisms, and one can access them through these little micro rests. So whether or not you're a child or an adult, every so often when trying to learn something, just pause for 10 seconds or so. Do your best to just clear your mind. Of course, it's very hard to clear the mind, but do your best to clear the mind and then go back to the learning task, as it were. And that has been shown to significantly accelerate the learning process and the retention of newly learned information. And then the last thing you touched on earlier, which is this notion of incremental learning. You said you like to throw yourself into something as kind of a litmus test of whether or not you enjoy it or not. Turns out that from beautiful work done by my colleague at Stanford School of Medicine, Eric Knudsen, has shown that yes, it's true that early in development, in humans, this would be up until the mid-20s, we can learn things in larger batches and much more easily than we can later in life. However, if one batches that work into smaller increments, and for instance, deciding, maybe set a timer, turning the phone off otherwise, and saying, I'm going to spend 3 minutes, just 3 minutes in trying to intensely learn this thing, even if I feel like I'm failing. If one does that repeatedly, those little increments of learning can lead to an outsized amount of learning overall. And so the nervous system loves incremental learning. It loves to batch things into focused little bouts. And, if that's already the tools that you've built up, which it sounds like you have, wonderful. But if somebody is out there struggling to learn, really trying to break things down into very brief periods of intense focus, that is the cue by which during sleep, the nervous system will change itself. And this has been shown over and over and over again, even in very late life individuals, people in their, we like to think life could go on further than this, but people in their 80s and 90s still have neuroplasticity. There's even evidence that new neurons can be produced in the hippocampus of people in their late 80s and 90s. So the capacity is there.
Rule number 4, use saunas.